Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Malibu Community Fire Safety Briefing tonight. Our presenter will be Assistant Chief Drew Smith from Division 7. Thank you very much, Chief Smith, for coming. And for a little bit of housekeeping for everyone, you will have noticed that you are currently unable to unmute yourselves and the chat feature is not enabled. At the end of the meeting, I will enable the chat feature. If you would like to ask Chief Smith a question, please type it in the chat or raise your hand and I will ask you to unmute so you can ask the Chief directly. With that, Chief, please take it away.
Great. Well, good evening. I'm Drew Smith and I'm your Assistant Fire Chief. I've been with the organization 34 years and I also serve as the fire department's fire behavior analyst. So I track and look at fire season fuels and seasonality of wildland fuels here locally at the state level and at the national level. And I just wanted to give you an overview of where we're at now and where we're going to trend into going into fall and winter of 2022. So things that we look at or I help with the research and development of is fall and winter outlooks, also the spring and summer outlooks. And I do this in coordination with the National Weather Service and the Geographic Area Command Center with fire behavior analysts and incident meteorologists to look at what the trends are and where it is projected to be. And just the cliff notes of where we're at, as you know, that we are in seasonal drought now. We do have a statewide drought, but there is two different comparisons in what we have here going on with our fuels and water compared to what is delivered to us from domestic use. So just at the snapshot as we transition into fall and going into winter, we're looking to near or above normal monsoonal showers, which we saw, and this was actually done before we had this last set of rains. So we were on target with that, which is very nice to have that win every once in a while when Mother Nature operates on what we think is going to be forecasted. We will have rainfall be well below normal for late September through December. And temperatures will be above normal through December. And just remember that above normal could sometimes fluctuate only between 3 and 7 degrees. So by no sense of the imagination are we going to be for extended period of times going into fall and winter looking at 20 to 30 to 40 degrees warmer than normal, like some of the times that we've seen in the past. So that is not expected. It was supposed to be well above normal, but that range can once again be up to 10 to 15 degrees, but sometimes it lasts for 3 days or 5 days, not in a 15 to 30 day stance. And we'll be near a normal amount of Santa Ana wind events in October through December, and using the word normal, and we'll kind of describe what normal is. And the maps you see just shows the state of the potential for fires to grow rapidly and where we're at in September. So we're at normal, but as we get to why it's above normal is because we come into our wind-driven fire regime as we get into the first part of October into December. So that's why you would see the indications of the red throughout Southern California and part of the Central Coast that are impacted with Santa Ana winds. So this just shows the latest drought measurement, and we're still, as you can see, I've outlined Los Angeles County, and we're in severe drought and extreme drought for our county at this time of year, which is not necessarily unique, but just remember going into this rainfall season, we did have normal precipitation throughout, which averages roughly 14 inches or so within Los Angeles County. So going into this year, or let's just say this fire season, we had average rainfalls for us going into this year. And so hopefully this chart isn't too busy for you, but I'll try to give you an overview on it. So if you look at the column on the left-hand side of the screen, and this is wind events associated with Santa Ana winds. And the blue indicates the number of average Santa Ana wind conditions and the average number of moderate to strong Santa Ana conditions. On the left shows that our strongest winds are normally in January and February. However, we have the least amount of large fire growth due to the fact that we've had precip that has stimulated annual grass, which we consider to be called green up. So when we have green grass, we don't have the same fire spread probabilities or components as we would in October, November, because we don't have that green up factor. And that green up is, once again, those annual grasses that grow. And as we know, as we get rainfall, regardless of how much we get, as we know, we get into February, March, and April, we have a very green fuel bed. And that's promulgated based upon the amount of precip that we get in our high frequency months of when we do get that precip, which usually starts in mid-November, transitioning through the middle of April. And so with that being said, this shows the amount of days and duration, but on average, we get roughly 8 Santa Ana wind events, I'll call it a fire season. And I call it a fire season because yes, we do have a year-round fire season, but it doesn't mean that you have the same fire characteristics in April as you do in June, or you do in October, or as you do in August. So every fire's character is different based upon the fuel conditions and the climatology at that time. So if you look at October, November, and December, the amount of days that we have wind is we have approximately 6 windy days or Santa Ana wind days in October, and extending close to 9 to 10 in November, and then December we get close to 10. So on average, we post out relatively high risk days, about 8 a season. And once again, that season, as I'm calling it, is our Santa Ana wind season. So the conditions of the fuels, Los Angeles County Fire Department tracks our live fuels. And so as we transition from summer to fall, we take live fuel moisture samples, which I'll be showing you here in a graphic here shortly. And what we look at the current state of the fuels. And there's 2 different components to fuels. There's a dead fuel component and a live fuel component. So that dead fuel component, that's the stuff that's not attached to primarily a piece of vegetation. It's dead fuels that may be within a piece of vegetation, but it isn't a living part of the plant. It's on the wildland, or if you want to say forest floor, or the mountainous terrain that's detached, that's down and accumulated over the landscape. Those are dead fuels that react to Mother Nature based upon precipitation, relative humidities, solar energy, heating, relative humidities, nighttime temperatures, cooling. So that exchange of how much moisture based upon the atmospheric condition is a dead fuel. And how receptive it is measured by weight and how big it is. So we look at fuels in category that are dead in category of size. So your grass that is dead and attached to the ground, or anything that's dead that's a 1/4 inch or less, is a 1 hour time lag fuel. So over the course of 1 hour, through the course of heating and cooling throughout the day, it loses or gains water weight. Those 10-hour fuels is the course of a fuel that's dead that loses or gains moisture over the course of 10-hour increment. And 100-hour fuel is fuels they're 3 inches or greater in diameter. So your larger deadwood pieces that may be within trees that are dead and haven't been maintained, they can drop down to the surface across the topography. And those also, over the course of 100 hours, take in and lose moisture. So we gauge how much moisture is within those dead fuels, because there's a lot of factors that go into why fires move across the landscape in the absence of wind and or with wind. And so that's just one element, and I'll describe a little bit more about that. So the lack of precipitation, or seasonal droughts as we call it, and the weather that we have, the live fuels respond to that. Large fire growth is supportive on Santa Ana wind-driven fire days. And that's because you have a wind element, a static wind source that's promulgated from the east and blows it to the Pacific Ocean. We know that we've had our annual grasses, that it's really green and lush out there. But as we get into mid to late summer, now into fall, without that precipitation or that, so just going, talking about our fuels, without green up in that annual grass in fall and winter, that initial attack, transitioning to extended attack, those are those fires that actually go then more than one day. That is greatly increased because the environmental conditions on Santa Ana wind-driven days, when you have temperatures that are routinely over 75 degrees, wind speeds that are in excess of 35 miles an hour, and relative humidities that are in the low teens to single digits, supports the right recipe to support large fire growth. And you can't have the same effects like I showed you on the earlier chart, given that we did get precip, let's say in November, December, and January, and some of our biggest winds we get, and you might have remember in the past, we've had significant winds in January or February, but have had green grass that's out there. We do have fires that do start, but they're limited, even though they can be destructive, but they're limited based upon the exponential spotting that you don't have as compared to those wind-driven fires as we get into the fall, because you have a lack of green up in that annual grass. So we really look at that sensitivity in our watershed fuel conditions from those dead fuels and live fuels. And I'll transition into the live fuels here in a second. So Los Angeles County Fire Department has a database of over 40 years worth of live fuel measurements. And this chart indicates a calendar year. It shows you an average for 40 years of live fuel moisture samplings. And we do the live fuel moisture samplings in 5 of the 6 forecast zones within LA County, because we know the climatology and fuel conditions are different along the coast as compared to interior of the LA Basin, to the Santa Clarita Valley, to the mountainous terrain and the high country. So we do fuel samples on those live fuels, which is live species. And basically what we do is we have our forestry division that goes out to certain areas within a forecast zone, and they clip a piece of the vegetation, and it's usually 6 inches long and 6 inches fat, I guess you could say. And they weigh it, and they get a weight in there, and they put it in an oven, and they cook all the water weight that's in it, and then they weigh it again. And then the representative fraction that they do gives you how much water weight is being retained within a live fuel. And how much water weight is being withheld within a live fuel is significantly coordinated with Mother Nature based upon soil moisture. Our live fuels and native fuels in the area are very resilient. They're very smart on how they survive and how they go into dormancy. And so when you look at the far left, which shows the number 40, then extends in a vertical direction to 220, that's the percent of live fuel moisture within that. So if you look at the 2022 with the 14 inches plus of rain we actually had our live fuels that were close to 200. They topped out at about 188 actually. And this is for the Santa Monica Mountains, which is one of our forecast zones. And so then if we compare to our 2021 year, you can see that we peaked later in the season, but we only got to about 125 within the Santa Monica Mountains on the targeted live fuels that we sampled. And then the black line shows the historical average. And then if you look at the line along the bottom, that at the mark of 60 at the live fuel, it extends from 60 all the way across right hand side of your screen. That indicates 60%. And 60% becomes important to us because with our live fuels and our native fuel beds, they are a dynamic fuel bed, as I mentioned, and they get to a point to where they don't have much water weight, so they react very violently under mild conditions and can support fire growth based upon environmental conditions very well. We look at a trigger and tracking when we get our live fuel moistures down to 80%. 80% is, I indicated it in a pinkish red box, and this is when we know fire activity increases on a routine day, is once our live fuel moistures get to 80. So we really look at why fires react the way they do, because there's a lot of elements to play. Once again, it's the dead fuel moistures and the live fuel moistures, and the combination of those two, and how fire is, where it starts, what its relationship or exposure to the wind is, what its relationship to the slope is, whether the fire starts in the middle of a road that has the ability to run up canyon, up slope, or if it starts at the top of the hill along a road system, let's say, does it have the ability to burn down canyon, down slope? And fire doesn't like to do that. However, you could have active backing fires, we call it, so something that's moving from the top of the hill down, and it's not going to do it as fast as it would run from the bottom to the top. But live fuel moistures and dead fuel moistures and the state of how they are gives us an association to how the fire is going to react, and then we can set our tactical plan according to that. So we're below average going into it for this season. We're slightly below average. But when we get into Santa Ana wind season, you still have the same outcomes if you're at 60% or 49% or even 80% when you're given a dry air mass at 35 miles an hour or greater and in those fuel beds because of how dry that wind element is. So on the fire danger analysis, and there's two different components to the fire world. One of them is a fire danger analysis. Fire danger is a rating on how we look at what the fire's ability is to start and spread, or the fire's ability to start, spread and become a large fire. So we know with the fire danger analysis that we look at, we know that our annual grasses are highly receptive in all areas with sunlight. That's because they're brown, as you can see as you drive through the beautiful areas that we live. We know that our live fuel moistures are at critical 60%, which it doesn't have much water weight, so you don't need as much heat energy to move it across the landscape. There's a moderate chance or probably for frequent initial attack fires on routine days. Once again, that's due to the state of the fuels. And there's a low probability of large fires in the absence of wind. Well, what does that mean? And what do we target a large fire in the Santa Monica Mountains? So doesn't mean you cannot have a fire that starts and spread, but in the absence of wind, we don't have much fire history in the Santa Monica Mountains in the absence of wind. We have fires that start, they're coupled with a southwesterly wind off of the Pacific Ocean. They run to the top of the ridge. Yes, they can. The fire doesn't care what's in its way, whether it's your firefighters, the public, your homes. It's going to move up canyon, upslope under these type of fuel conditions very rapidly on routine days. So we look at large fires. The average large fire in the Santa Monica Mountains is wind dependent. And usually those fires are 8,000 acres or greater within the first 24 hours. So we use that as a scale to look at how many fires we get based upon a non-high risk day. And then we look at 100 years worth of fire data both ways, actually, and where those targeted timeframes are and how large fires are going to be, which I'll show you some stuff to how we come up with that. So a high risk day is identified as a dry condition coupled with high winds. So we know that we have dry fuel conditions. We know that we have high winds that are out of the east, and they dry the fuels very rapidly. Remember, as I talked to just shortly ago about 1 hour time lag fuels, 10-hour time lag fuels, and 100-hour time lag fuels. Those are under diurnal conditions, meaning daily conditions. When meaning an example would be if you just get out of the shower and your hair is wet and you didn't use a blow dryer, it's going to take a significantly longer amount of time for your hair to dry. But however, if you get a hair dryer out and now decide to dry your hair, it's done in a rapid time. So the fuels react the same way based upon that dry wind element. And then we also look at a burning index, and we use an analysis in a burning index to look at the combination of historical climatology and current climatology and current fuel conditions through a computer algorithm. And I'll show you a little slide on that next and what that looks like. So we know that our thresholds, and we look at our high risk days, we have the ability to forecast easily within 3 days out, 7 days out, when we know that we have a high risk day coming so we can prepare. We measure our live fuels every 2 weeks so we can see the trends on what our live fuels are doing, but we know the right recipe to support large fire growth with a wind driven type of scenario with a Santa Ana wind that's approaching us. We can look at our live fuel moistures at or less than 75%. We also have calculations on what our fine dead fuel moistures are. Remember, those are those dead fuels that are 1/4 inch in diameter or less, regardless of how they are. If they're dead and they're that diameter or less, if they're less than 7%, they're going to be very vulnerable and susceptible to support fire. And with that 10-hour dead fuel component, most of those dead fuels are 1/4 inch to 1 inch in diameter. They're at 7% or less. And if we have targeted wind speeds greater than 35 miles an hour, and then when it goes into the formula, we know that we support a burning index that's 191 or greater, that we have the right recipe to support large fire growth. So this is a daily fire danger analysis, and you can see that there's 6 categories here: the LA Basin, the Santa Monica Mountains, the Santa Cruz Valley, the High Country, the Antelope Valley, and also Catalina. So we know that we have vulnerabilities in the Santa Monica Mountains, but we also know within the LA Basin that we inherit the fires that extend through the Santa Monica Mountains. So we have remote automated weather stations, and it gives a station model number. And this remote automated weather stations, all they do is record and take climatology. And with that climatology comes the 2 p.m., and we use this in the formula, the 2 p.m. weather, the relative humidity forecast of the day, what the 20-foot wind speed is, what the 10-hour dead fuel moisture is, and then through the formula, it gives you a burning index. Within the LA Basin and the Santa Monica Mountains, you can see that in the Santa Monica Mountains, we use the combination of the Chesbro ROS, the Malibu Hills ROS, the Beverly Hills ROS, the Leo Carrillo ROS, the Malibu Canyon ROS, and the Topanga ROS. And we use those and couple them together to really help fine tune what the climatology is within the Santa Monica Mountains. It gives us that outlook, and then it also gives us the burning index on an average. And then with that average, it gives us a live fuel moisture of 63. So, and then it gives, you can see that you have the average of 112 for the burning index of all those. But each one of those stations also have an individual burning index. So you can actually see if there's any point within those remote automated weather stations where you have higher vulnerability or less vulnerability. So it really showcases the state of the fuels and where they're at. So looking at this chart, and this shows, so I put 63 on there so I can show you that's the live fuels. It's part of this formula. But also, if you look at what the burning index was 117-ish for today. So basically, those of you that grew up going to high school or junior high now, and they use Peachy folders, so use Peachy folder skills for this. We know that the forecasted burning index for today was 117. We know that we can go to, we see 0 in the upper left-hand quadrant, 0, 50, 100, 150. And we see a series of lines, and then we see a dashed line all across the top. And I'll go through what those mean. And so we look at how we go to September. We know that the burning index was 117. So we go across and it puts it right about just above the blue line and close to that black line right up in there. And so what that's telling us is that the blue line is what historical climatology averages is for the months of May through December, and the black line shows the highest ever recorded burning index, and then the dashed line that's just below the 250 mark, which is actually 242, shows us that that's the 97th percentile. So only 3% of the days, whether it be in May or December, had a burning index above 242. So we know that when we're in the top 3%, we have a significant vulnerability for a fire to start. We have a high potential for it to spread and become 8,000 acres or greater over the course of the first 24 hours. The upper right-hand quadrant shows you the fire danger area. It tells you the maximum burning index ever recorded for that. For 5 years worth of history. It tells you how many days we use for the formula, and that the 97th percentile, only 3% of the days had a burning index above 242. And so the lower left-hand quadrant shows us historical fires to mention. And if you look at the Woolsey fire, if we know that the top 3% is at 243 or greater, the Woolsey fire was 406. So it showed that we were in a historic wind event. We had historic record type of conditions to support large fire growth. But we've had a lot of those type of days, and you can go back for 50 years. But remember, for a fire to start and spread, you have to have a start. And it takes human intervention of some sort. Something needs to trigger it, because we do not have large fire growth in the fall based upon a Mother Nature occurrence, which would be lightning. We don't have that anymore in our fire regime. The lower right-hand quadrant shows past experience, and we use this card to brief our crews. So when we get resources coming into the Santa Monica Mountains, we have them coming into Malibu on the 93 Old Topanga fire, the 96 Calabasas fire, the Woolsey fire. We had over 7,000 people assigned to some of those fires. And so we need to brief them and say, hey, when you have a burning index of this is the right recipe, and it gives you situational awareness for the crews to be briefed and be as safe as they can in the most dangerous type of conditions to protect life, protect property, protect the watershed, protect the environment. So we look at past experience, and we know that wind-driven fires can produce rates of spread of over 2 miles an hour, and they have spotting distances up to 3 miles ahead of the fire front. Remember, we talked about all the dry grass that's there because you have relative humidities that are in single digits and low teens. All that receptive fuel bed is what gives you the fire, rather the ability to, if you want to use the word leapfrog, if you want to use the word exponential fire growth, for them to start new fires and transition on. And from the 101 to the Pacific Ocean, in most places, on average, over the landscape, if you were to flatten it out, it's 8 to 11 miles. that can happen really rapidly. But with the terrain that we have, some places you have is topography, wind sheltered, you have different dynamics on how the wind channels through those canyons. So your fire dynamics will be different in some areas than others. But this gives firefighters an indicator of what to expect based upon a weather forecast and being briefed by their captain or the division that they're working for, the strike team leader they're working for, the operations section chief. When you have the incident meteorologist doing the briefing, you have your fire behavior analyst giving the briefings in the morning. This is stuff that the crews can take back and they can formulate their tactical plan to keep them safe. So we go a step farther, knowing that we had a burning index of 171. So that was the forecast for today. And that puts us in the green category. We have low fire behavior intensity. We have routine weather for the area, and spotting with a convective column is up to a half mile under that type of burning index. And then it gives the identifiers of what's going to make a fire move. Fires are mainly topography dominated with slow to moderate rates of spread, and alignment of forces must be identified on routine weather days. And that means that if you're on a south facing slope with a southwesterly wind, the fire is going to move to the top of the ridge a lot quicker than it would than if it had to back down towards the ocean, let's say. And then it gives key indicators, which we fall into this today, so you can see that this is really valid on what we do. We know a key indicator that we did have temperatures between 70 and 90 today. We know that we had that southwesterly wind around 12 miles an hour. We know what the relative humidities were. They're at 46%. And it shows that our 10-hour dead fuel moistures, and we know we have live fuel moistures at 60. And it talks about when the months of those targeted months it happens, and it also gives us tactical engagement options. So we can really brief our crews, but we also use it when we have to brief others, so we can have sense making. And I talked to fire danger. This is a fire danger element. Fire behavior is how is the fire reacting under the current environmental factors, that being the weather and the fuel. So in closing, a high risk day will be in a combination of high winds and dry weather. Large scale wind events are routinely forecast in the fall and winter months. High winds and large fire growth is dependent upon spotting ahead of the advancing fire front. The current state and forecast of climatology will support spotting. High winds and live fuel moistures below 60 will produce aggressive fire behavior on high risk days. And the combination of the two factors will create an advancing fire front with significant spotting, large fire days in the months of October through December, and have the potential of 10,000 plus acres, and are associated with rainfall of 2 inches or less pre-fire start. And why that is important, we did get some precip, but if we don't get 2 inches of rain spread out through 3 days or greater, it really just knocks the dust off the fuels, or the dead fuels will absorb what precip they get, but over the course of a lag time, it'll dry out, and it's really Mother Nature's sponge. So really what we look at is, when do we get 2 inches rain or greater, and how is it distributed? 2 inches in an hour isn't the same of 2 inches over the course of 2.5 days. And with that, I will leave it to any questions. I thank you for your time. Hopefully it was informative. And if there's questions, I would really enjoy to answer.
Absolutely. So everyone, you should have the ability to enter in the chat feature. Please type your questions in there if you would like me to ask them. If you would like to ask your questions directly, you can either raise your hand or simply type in the chat, "I have a question." Does anyone have a question for Chief Smith? First question is from Doug Stewart. What types of deployments go with go with the high fire danger forecast?
Ooh, that is a great question. So every day, your Los Angeles County Fire Department has 2 immediate need strike teams available. A strike team is 5 light engines with a leader that we will move to high risk areas. So meaning that we do deploy those resources, like when we get into May, June, and July, we will move them into the Antelope Valley because they have higher risk days in late spring, early summer as compared to here. So we also can augment that with our hand crew workforce, and we can upstaff our type 1 hand crews. We also augment with putting our dozers out. We have a total of 10 dozers, and we have operators. So if we have to support that bulldozer mission, we will then tactfully deploy them in the high risk areas. So for you, where we put a bulldozer is at 2 different locations. One will be on the 101 side, and then the other one would be on the other side of the tunnels, let's say, and we'll put it at Camp 13, which is on Encinal Canyon. So we are ahead of that with our dozers, because I'm sure that you all know they don't move fast. And so we will tactfully deploy them. So we can have one on the coastal side to deploy, and we have one on the inland side to deploy. And also with our helicopters, we have our helicopter fleet and also our helicopter coordinator. And and also we have our contract air that is staffed 24/7. So we have the ability to flex greater than we already are on a routine day. So that's a great question. So we look at, once again, those forecast zones based upon the burning index, so we know where we have the vulnerability within LA County and move them to an associated location.
Thank you very much, Chief. We have Richard Hinson, who has a question he would like to ask you specifically. Mr. Hinson, please, you are being asked to unmute.
Okay, I noticed on the map, it goes up Encinal Canyon, but then it goes to Decker Canyon Road all the way over. Why not go over on Mulholland to Canaan?
On what are you referring to, sir? What do you mean?
Apologies, Chief, I muted him. Mr. Hinson, please unmute.
Oh, let's try that again. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes, sir.
Okay, I was looking at the map and it's zone 14. I'm in zone 14 on Encinal Canyon.
Okay, I thought you were referring to a map and that I didn't know which map you were. Okay, you're in zone 14. I know zone 14.
Okay, so if there's a fire, it has this little yellow line that goes up, and then it looks like it goes up, and it doesn't go over Mulholland to Canaan. It goes up all the way up the rest of Decker Canyon Road over to the 101 someplace or out there. I was just wondering why. What kind of information will we get to go down to PCH and to go either north on PCH, which is west, or south or east, whatever? How will we know which way to get out of here?
Okay, that's a great question. So we can't tell you exactly, and we can't set that if you live in a certain location, you will exit or evacuate a certain way. And I'll tell you the why. So the way that it works is that we have a fire start and we look at how fast and how far it's going to go over the course of time. And remember, we have evacuation order, an evacuation warning, and we have shelter in place. One thing that we don't want to do is to put you in a vehicle on the road system with no time to get to a safe location. So the way that it works is we are in unified command with law enforcement and our law partners, and that being that close to that side, you have LA County Sheriffs, Ventura County Sheriffs, California Highway Patrol, we have state parks, we have national parks, we have Caltrans. So that direction on how we want that traffic routed is going to be flexible every time. And that's based upon where the fire starts and where it's spreading, that we don't put you in between an advancing fire front in a very compromising position with little to no options on a road. So I can't give you specifics on that, but I know that our plan is, which we work with Lost Hill Sheriffs, we have robust evacuation plans on how the playbook is going to go every year, and we communicate that throughout the year. So we're all secure on the plan and how it's supposed to go. But the route is going to be determined based upon where the fires start and where it's spreading.
Thank you very much, Chief. We have 2 questions from Merrill May.
Okay.
The first question is it helpful to have fire hydrants clear of vegetation, painted and visible?
It is. So those things can hide on you, let's say, because the visibility of those is different at 2 o'clock in the afternoon compared to 2 o'clock in the morning. So one thing that there's responsibility to have blue dots in front of them. Those are called bot dots that help indicate that. They're also to be maintained if people have them adjacent or near them to be cleared out. We do send work crews out in our jurisdictional engine companies to clear around them. But remember, in this evergreen type of lush fuel bed that we have, just for an example, laurel sumac can grow 6 feet a year. So your fire crews could have come and cleared it back when brush clearance was going on in May and June, and then turn the corner. Now we are August, September, and it's grown 2.5 to 4 feet. So yes, it is best practice to have those cleared. And our engine companies that are out there, they will clear them, or they will make note if it's a private hydrant, and they have the expectation to make sure that those hydrants are clear.
Thank you very much, Chief. You actually answered the second part of that individual's question. The next question is from Miss Georgia Goldfarb. Is it then correct to say that invasive grasses throughout our communities, which inevitably lead to wildland habitat, are increasing our wildfire risk?
So I can say yes. So, but there's a couple different elements to that. So meaning that regardless if it's a non-native and invasive, if it's a fine fuel that's under 1/4 inch, regardless of whether it's native or non-native, it supports a different set of vulnerability for embers to catch and transition fire under high-risk days. However, you have different tactical opportunities in light fuels as you do in older fuels. A significant difference in fire intensity in grass fires. Grass fires can grow very rapidly, but they don't have the same intensity associated with them. So your tactical opportunities of engagement with aircraft, hand crews are completely different. So when you have fuel beds, like if you have a significant load of grass over the course of an acre that's 1 foot tall, or if it's 3 feet tall and it's only grass, it won't get any heavier than 1 to 3 tons per acre. But when you have native vegetation, which we all love, and if it hasn't seen fire frequency in 25 years or greater, you can get up to 25 to 40 tons per acre. So the tactical opportunities of engagement are different based upon fire intensity and the penetration from water dropping helicopters, very large air tankers. The combating those is more challenging. Plus, embers that travel in grass don't have much more residency time in air than 500 feet, where larger fuels that are native or non-native, it doesn't matter. But when you get stuff in an age class that has a very robust old growth fuel bed, those the residency time in air from those embers are up to 3 miles. That's a great question, but yes, regardless of they're native or non-native, grass, the number one to large fire growth is fine fuels, regardless if they're native or not. That's because they're the one that's going to promulgate a fire to start and spread. So the more fine grass you have, the more susceptibility that you have to have an initial attack fire. If you were to have no understory fuel and you had light leaf litter, but you had very mature vegetation, you won't have the same effects from a cigarette that comes out a window as you would fine fuels from native or non-native fine fuels. I know that was a long one. Hopefully that explained it for you there, Georgia.
Thank you very much, Chief. Our next question is from Colin Drummond, and I'm going to tweak it just a little bit. Can you please explain how and why you deploy your trucks, tankers, helicopters, tankers, etc.?
I can. How we deploy those? Yeah, you bet. So we have a response matrix on every wildland fire. So we don't downsize when we have a fire. It doesn't matter if it's January 1st or December 31st or anywhere in between. We have a full complement that we send, which is 7 fire engines. We send 4 hand crews. We send 1 fly crew. We send 3 helicopters. Now we have contract air. So you're going to get the 3 helicopters plus the helitanker, and you're going to get 2 of the fixed wing super scoopers on every reported brush fire. And so with that being said, once the first in engine company makes a size up, they right size the incident for what they have. They may not need all that equipment, or when they see that they have the potential for something to go big, they order a complement of more equipment to go to a greater alarm fire. And we go up to a 3rd alarm fire, and then we start getting complements of what we need, we order. So it might be a strike team configuration, might need 4 more bulldozers. We might need to order additional fixed wing aircraft, and we order that based upon the fire, because the expectation is in a follow-up report given to the battalion chief, but it's basically going to the communications center, is gives growth potential. And that growth potential gives us the awareness for people coming into an incident, how to right size that fire.
Thank you very much, Chief. Our next question comes from Chris Frost. Can you please tell us what is the best response time for Bravo 69, excuse me, and the average response time from Bravo 69 and the potential difference between?
Okay, so 69 Bravo is, it's really the only one in the world, and it's atop of Saddle Peak Motorway, and it's just above our Fire Camp 8. And actually it's 30 acres of paved and improvements that's up there with 30,000 gallon fixed tanks. Each one of those tanks is roughly 7,300 gallons that has water 365 days a year. So our aircraft can come and snorkel out of those, if you will. And it takes about 90 seconds to fill up a 3,000 gallon large helicopter. And it takes about 60 seconds for our 1,000 gallon tank helicopters. So what we like to do with our helispots, and that is a premium helispot, and within a 5-mile turnaround time, with getting those aircraft in concert, we can get to where we combated the Palisades fire. We've combated some of the fires that we've had in Topanga on high-risk days. And if we know that if we can't stop a fire within the first 15 minutes or 7 acres or less, it really goes to 125 to 1,000 acres within the first hour. And then once you have that much open line, the fire grows rapidly under wind-driven fire conditions. So 69 Bravo is very convenient because we have that as an opportunity to get a lot of aircraft in, is what we'll call in concert, to come in and or multiple to come in at the same time, because the tanks are spread out, so they can go drop water and get in this routine, in this concert, if you will, in the chain, if you will, to to fly within 5 to 7 minutes with helicopters. So you have constant water delivery through an aerial firefighting asset. So we have heli spots throughout all of LA County, a significant amount of them, but there's none like 69 Bravo and Topanga that really supports the firefighting mission for what we do in the Santa Monica Mountains. Great question, Mr. Frost.
Thank you very much, Chief. Next question comes from Andrew Wayman. How are out-of-area fire companies educated about access and exit and evacuation plans for various neighborhoods? Are they familiar with the beacon boxes?
So not everybody's familiar with beacon boxes. I know boxes. There's been a movement within Malibu. Agora Hills has beacon boxes. We have one in Malibu right at my fire station on Carbon Canyon. And so that is another tool in the toolbox. However, with the platforms that we have now with QR codes, with our fire folks that use a QR code, and we can distribute maps that can come up on your iPad. Really, the days of a Thomas guide aren't there anymore because of the information that we can share through a QR code to send a map, to use a mapping program called Avenza, and we can send those maps to engine companies. So that technology is there. And your out of region or out of state firefighters, to be quite honest, don't know the area. Just like when I've been on fires in Idaho, Montana, Alaska, Georgia, I didn't know the area until I got the map products. Or those map products, there's quite a large network of mapping products available that the fire community uses, and specific ones, agency specific ones, are shared very routinely, very quick now. So beacon boxes are another tactical tool to help with that information delivery for specific neighborhoods on specifics they may not know, or they can have further intelligence based upon a beacon box within a specific area. So it has value to complement what we already have in place.
Thank you very much, Chief. The next question comes from Terry Davis. What options are available for help with removing expensive dead materials such as big dead trees on private property when residents cannot afford the removal?
Ooh. So I know that there is potential grants that are available. Depending on where you live, there may be options to do that. We have hand crews, but I can't commit them to doing private property unless we can couch it for a training mission, because we do stuff on private property for training, but we're not in the business going clearing people's property because it needs to be done. So that responsibility is put on the homeowner. So the exact avenue, I would talk to the city that you're within and see what is available through the city on any type of that help. But I could also talk to our forestry division and see if there's any grants or help that is available as well.
Thank you, Chief. The last question we have in queue comes from Ms. Shelley Myers. If SCE turns out our power during a high wind event, how will we receive information about potential fire activity from the city?
So I can talk to notifications. We need to anticipate the worst and hope for the best. So we know that if we have a power outage that may or may not be because of a power outage because of Edison, it might be because it happened somewhere else. It doesn't start a fire. There's a lot of different variables there. So I know that we have a program for that we have NOAA weather radios that gives and distributes information on weather alerts through the National Weather Service. Also, there's AM radio that we have a broad public information office for making sure that the message from fire information is validated from the incident command post and it is the right message for the expectation of what we would like people to do. So it is very challenging, and I know a lot of people have got emergency generators, backups. They've really done some great work in their homes on being resilient. However, there is no absolute besides being as informed as you can every day and just being alert. But I know that there is consequence to not having electricity. So there's people that will have radios that are on batteries, AM and FM radios that you get a signal you can do. There's a lot of different methods. But please just use valid, credible information for what the expectation is during an emergency.
Thank you, Chief. We have one longer question, which I will email to you about invasive grasses and native shrublands after the meeting.
Okay.
But beyond that longer form question, I believe that's it at this time. Again, if you have a question, please raise your hand or put it in the chat. Ms. Goldfarb, I will be emailing your question to Chief directly after this meeting.
Oh, okay. So I'm seeing this in the chat. This is with George's so many structures. Yeah, I'm familiar with this research. I work in these same groups with these people. Okay, I see. You want me to talk to these?
Oh, sure, Chief, if you
Yeah, I can.
much
So
appreciated.
I can do this. So for Georgia, so why are so many structures burning in California? Well, that's from Phoenix and Keeley, Dr. Keeley. Yeah, in contrast to native shrublands of southern and central coast California, increased human-caused ignitions have resulted in unnaturally high fire frequency, with increase of wildfire further promoted by ongoing conversation of shrublands to more flammable invasive grasses. That's a correct statement. That's all I could say. That is correct. So we have to find what's the balance. What do we do? How do we bring that? And we've had this conversation, Georgia. How do we bring that balance between the native sustainability and land management practices for environmental sensibility? So we can live here, we can be protected, but also have our beautiful native vegetation be protected as best we can. We know that fires are inevitable. Like post-Woolsey fire, we have a blank canvas now, as I've talked to. How do we want that to look? What do we do with the smartest minds and the research and development that I'll say that I'm involved in? How do we bring this to the forefront on sustainability for the wildlands so we can decrease the amount of non-native invasive species, because we do want our native chaparral to be there with us. We want to live in that wildland community. That's what we want. We need to find that balance on how we're going to do that. And then invasive grasses seem to be taking over the chaparral in areas where it has died back. They're introduced by the profuse growth around our properties. Wouldn't be advisable to remove them before they seed in the wildlands. See article, right? So Dr. Keeley, right? So yeah, they are. Well, you think post wildfire, the non-native invasives, that could be. How do you think that they get there though? it's like people aren't going in the middle of the hills and planting non-native invasive. They're traveled through migratory habitat and the weather things. And so really to couch that, there's a balance once again on how we're going to do this land management, and whether we do it with land mammal use, whether we try to look at how do we do mechanical modification, how do we do reseeding to bring back our native vegetation, how do we present a mosaic landscape, how do we introduce Mother Nature's fire regime. Not any one of those topics is the golden ticket. It's the balance of all those to bring back the sustainability of the non-native invasives taking over the chaparral community that we have. And that's what our forestry division, that's what your fire department wants. But we also have to look at the people that live there, is we have to look at the life component to that, the property conservation component, and then environmental component. And it is a tough to get everybody to agree on what the best course of action is. But I can say from Drew Smith, I want to look at how do we bring that balance back for the environmental sustainability for these beautiful Santa Monica mountains. And with all the intelligent people that we have with your fire department, National Park Service, the state parks, MRCA, we have some phenomenal people that are of great mind to work together to do this. Those are great questions, Georgia. I appreciate them.
Thank you very much, Chief. At this time, we have no more questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, last call. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat or raise your hand and I will ask to unmute you. This recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be available online at the city's malibuscity.org/prep, PREP month. And the recording will be available on the city's YouTube page. So at this time, there are no more questions. Thank you all very much for attending tonight. Thank you very much, Chief Smith, for coming and presenting this wonderful information. And again, this recording and the presentation will be available online. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a fantastic night.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.